We are back with another episode of Dynasty Decisions, episode number 110, where we break down all of your Dynasty teams. We are coming up less than a month away from the NFL draft, so I'm sure a lot of you guys are antsy to talk about your rookie picks, talk about how you're going to transform some of your teams. Of course, if you do want to submit teams to Dynasty Decisions, we have a link down below in the description for that. Flock Fantasy site subscribers using promo code FSE do get to skip the line, so consider signing up over there if you do want your team covered ASAP. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so tackling the first team here, we got from Chan Hughes, a faithful submitter to Dynasty Decisions for many years now. 12-team, full PPR, Superflex League. Kyler Murray, Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold as the quarterbacks. Looks like he just had the startup here because he has all the startup values listed. Tony Pollard, Ramondre Stevenson, Brian Robinson, Zach Moss, very light at running back, very kind of like zero RB type of build here. Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, Drake London, Jerry Jeudy, Curtis Samuel, other guys there at wide receiver. Mark Andrews as the main tight end with Cole Kmet in the wings there. 108, 201, 311, couple picks there. And then also all of his future picks minus his second and 25, but he does have an extra third.
Yeah, so this team looks very similar. If you recall a video we did a couple days ago.
Right. Okay. So it must be the same exact team here. He says he commissions 2 leagues, one with his buddies from his hometown, one with the guys that he met in college here. And he basically said he combined the 2 leagues with the best of both. And this is his team coming out of the startup. He said it's a pretty sharp league. All the teams are pretty solid. You guys answered an important question on the video yesterday, apparently. So he said he's just wondering what his strategy would be with his team, or if these moves are moves, or any other moves, sorry, we would be looking to make. So he said put the pick next to the players so we can grade his draft as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. So what he wants us to do is look at the team, look at where we got each of the picks, and kind of determine what his draft grade would be. The standouts in terms of value right off the bat that I'm noticing. So I think you got fine value at your quarterback position, 205, 607, 1701 appropriate based on the names that you got versus the pick numbers they went. The one that really glares out to me, though, is the value that you got at wide receiver, man, because I really do like Garrett Wilson, mid-second round pick. I think that's very, very good for him. Puka Nacua at the 301. Again, this is a guy I value inside my top 24. So getting him outside of the top 24, I'm really, really cool with. And then Drake London at the 311. I don't know when you had the startup, but I mean, post, Kirk Cousins signing there, probably post Kirk Cousins signing there, right? Because he does end up stacking him with Kirk Cousins. But regardless, though, post Kirk Cousins signing there, 311, I think is a really nice valuation for Drake London.
Yeah, I like Andrews in a tight end premium at the 508 too. I think that's a good value there. And honestly, at running back too, like you went very light, you went very cheap at running back, but Pollard at 1007, Ramondre at 1010, like Ramondre especially, I think at 1010 is a great value. Brian Robinson at 1103. Again, I'm assuming this was after Austin Eckler signed there. Zach Moss at 1205, Gibson at 1505, Herbert at 1703 is an awesome value. I think
even Dylan
he has a chance to work into that backfield still. So I mean, generally speaking, it looks like you traded out of round 1 to end up securing a 205 and a 207 total there. And you probably ended up picking a bunch of like mid-round picks up. He said at the 511, he got the 108 at the 511 in the startup draft, the rookie 108 there. And then he also got the 201 at the 810. So he also has some rookie picks that he's going to add to this team, right? At 108, you're probably going to get, I would assume, maybe a JJ McCarthy. Maybe you roll with a, Brock Bowers if he's there, or Rome Odunze if he's there, but most likely you're looking at JJ McCarthy or wide receiver 4.
Well, if you remember the context of the video from a couple days ago when he submitted this question, is that he initially planned on the 108 being JJ McCarthy, but apparently there's buzz in his league that JJ McCarthy will not be there at the 108. So that was actually his question. It's like, what should I do at the 108? And I mean, regardless though, I mean, Kyler Murray, Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold should be fine, at least for the intermediate. And we also had mentioned, like, if you want to send one of your future picks for like a Matthew Stafford type, given the context of this team, because I do think this should be, especially out of the startup, a contending level team, I'm cool with making that move as well if you miss out on JJ at 8.
Yeah, I mean, if you had this team and the league was going on for 6 years, it probably wouldn't be the best contender in the world. But knowing that everybody's probably pretty experienced, everybody's going to have balanced contenders. Nobody's just going to have like a loaded roster by any means. I think you could probably compete with this thing. So worst case scenario at 108, if Odunze or Brock Bowers are there for it, and I think he mentioned kind of some concern if Bowers being on the board there. Maybe you can sell that pick. Maybe you can't sell that pick, in which case maybe you could sell Andrews or something like that by taking Bowers. For me, yeah, I think you're just going to go best player available at 108. Maybe go with an Xavier Worthy, a Brian Thomas Jr. in a really good landing spot if they get one. But for the most part, it's probably going to be Odunze, McCarthy, or Bowers. Ideally, it's McCarthy, considering you kind of need some long-term quarterback insulation there, especially if he does go to Minnesota too. You'd actually have the little stack there with Sam Darnold and with JJ McCarthy at 201. Probably best receiver available is most likely what you're going to do there. Hopefully a McConkey, a Troy Franklin, somebody like that. Maybe an AD Mitchell if you are high on the upside there. But for the most part, I think this is a pretty well-balanced roster.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. You did a good job. And I mean, we know Chan Hughes, sharp dynasty player. He's actually in the Lasso League with me. He submitted Dynasty Decisions a ton of times. So you have a good head on your shoulders. I already know that.
But yeah, definitely a good head on Chan Hughes' shoulders. He's a faithful submitter to Dynasty Decisions, so he kind of knows what he's doing at this point. We can move on to the next team here, which is from Jonathan B., a 12-team standard league super flex format as well. Jalen Hurts, Geno Smith is the top guys. Jameer Gibbs, Isaiah Pacheco, Travis Etienne, very strong at running back with like guys like Chuba Hubbard and Zach Moss in reserve there. Zay Flowers, Jerry Jeudy, Tyler Boyd, Russell Gage, guys like that at wide receiver. Evan Ingram as the main tight end. Does not have his first rounder or his third or fourth rounder in 2024. Does have all of his picks by the looks of it in 25. So again, he said this is his first team doing a dynasty league. And I will say it is important context to know that this is a standard league, not PPR. So having a good running back core in a standard league is more valuable than having a good running back core in a PPR league, hypothetically. So it is good knowing that he, is in a standard format having this running back core. He said this team went out in the 6th seed last year, which looks about right to me. It looks like about an average team. He said he could use any tips possible, and he's having a hard time understanding the values of each draft pick / tier veteran versus rookie players in terms of draft capital and trade value. So obviously, Jonathan, you do have access to our trade value chart. I would encourage you to check it out. Unfortunately, we don't really do it basis on standard. It's mostly PPR stuff, so it might change a little bit for you, but for the most part, he said the rest of the scoring, he also listed it there as well. I just read through it. It's just basically standard stuff like, points per passing yards and all that kind of stuff. So for the most part, when you look at this team, what do you think is the direction that he's looking at?
I mean, there's a very obvious need with this team. And I'm sure you noticed it. I noticed it. Even in a standard league, when you could start 3 wide receivers in your lineup and your 3 wide receivers at this current point are Zay Flowers, Jerry Jeudy, and Tyler Boyd, safe to assume that you need some wide receiver help.
Yeah, and it looks like part of the reason is because he ended up trading away his best wide receiver there on January 3rd. He sent away Lamar Jackson, Garrett Wilson, and Brian Robinson for Jerry Jeudy, Jalen Hurts, and Travis Etienne. Now, again, Hurts and Jackson probably cancel each other out. They're probably similar assets. Garrett Wilson and Brian Robinson for Jerry Jeudy and Etienne. Again, in a standard league, Etienne's going to have more value probably than he would in a PPR or half PPR. But I still want Garrett Wilson and Brian Robinson in that. That's deal.
And you didn't make this deal. This is my face at the previous owner. It's like, I understand the standard scoring, but are we not forgetting that there's 3 wide receiver spots here? Like, I don't understand the rationale for this guy doing that, especially knowing the context of this guy's roster going in and knowing that he already had Gibbs, Pacheco, Moss, whatever, but like, it's better than Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, I don't know why he would have sold Garrett Wilson with this team. Maybe he's an Eagles fan, and that's why he wanted Hurts or something like that, and he overpaid for Hurts. But yeah, not a great situation there. He somehow was able to offload Ronald Jones in the next deal, which is really strange.
Sorry, I also have to add the context. The fact that this guy made this deal and then orphaned the team within 2 months is the scummiest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, we've seen people do stuff like that. I mean, right before he orphans the team too, making like a nothing deal of Ronald Jones and a third. Justice Hill and Tutu Atwell is what he got back. I actually think he probably won that low key. I mean, I don't know, dude. It's just like, who cares? Like 3rd round pick.
Third easily.
I might even prefer the 3rd in that situation, to be honest.
I easily prefer the 3rd. Like Justice Hill and Tutu Atwell are worthless to me. They're roster fodder.
Yeah, they are. So, yeah, this guy doesn't really know what he's doing. I will say, he said this is his first season doing a dynasty league. I probably would have advised against taking over an orphan for your first dynasty league because you inherit someone else's problems. You could have done your first dynasty league out of the startup. And because it's your first league, one of the tips that I always say to people is maybe don't make that many trades during the startup. Just maybe stick and pick at most of your picks because that's the quickest way to ruin your team out of a startup as a first-time dynasty player. But for me, it's like taking over an orphan is more of a veteran dynasty move. So I probably wouldn't have done that, but it could be in worse shape, I will say.
It's like when you're picking up the game God of War for the first time, and like initially it's a tough learning curve, but it's a game that you end up enjoying, and maybe later on you want to, put it on expert mode, put it on hard mode. It's not the type of game that the first time you ever play it, you want to, experience on expert mode. That's kind of how I'm describing the status of this team. This is going to be a hard one, man. And for your first season experiencing it, like, it's going to be tough. I'm just going to say that right now. Like, again, I want to address this guy. March 4th, he ends up making a deal and then orphans the team. I don't have to talk about it much more, but regardless, it's going to be tough. You don't have much draft capital given the status of this team as well. You just got to buckle your chin in. And realistically, at this point, try to get value for the running back position because the rest of your team is telling you can't compete, I would say.
Yeah, it would be nice if you had a couple like if you threw a Deebo Samuel, a Chris Godwin, a couple extra just solid enough wide receivers to get you by, in addition to having a great running back core. Because if you just looked at this running back core, I'd be like, oh, this team's ready to compete in a standard league. But yeah, you're missing a third quarterback. Your second quarterback is Geno Smith. Like, you don't really have that good of wide receivers. Your tight end is Evan Ingram, who's fine, but he's not really going to move the needle for you. So yeah, I would maybe strip this thing down. That's probably the way I'm looking at it. You should be able to, in a standard league, you should get 2-1s easily for Jahmyr Gibbs. You should get at least a first and a second for ETN and Pacheco in a standard league, if not potentially more. Those guys are worth quite a bit in a standard league. So again, if you can't get the value you need for the running back position, you might be forced to hold them until the season is going on and you actually see that production play itself out. But I wouldn't really wait because I view those three guys as pretty valuable running backs at this point in time. And I would want to punt them into future capital, 25, 26. Again, hopefully these guys are all kind of newbie dynasty players. I'm not sure if you know them personally or whatever, but for me, I would try and take advantage of maybe them not knowing the 25 and 26 classes and just load up picks in those classes.
For sure. But with that being said, I think we pretty much gave you the path to go. You got a lot to work to do. I'm not gonna, sugarcoat it here. Like, you're gonna have to start getting active because otherwise, like, this team's gonna get left in the dust with the wide receivers you have at this spot.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of work to do for Jonathan there. Let's move on to the next team here, which is from Daniel K., another faithful submitter to Dynasty Decisions very often here. 10-team, full PPR, super flex league. Kyler Murray, Bryce Young, Breece Hall, literally no other running backs he lists there. Justin Jefferson, Puka Nacua, Gabe Davis, Jamison Williams, Dontavian Wicks, Elijah Moore. So he's got some depth there at wide receiver and a couple studs. Kyle Pitts, David Njoku, Tucker Kraft is the main guys. 102, 104, 107, 108, 109, 203. 302, and then also some extra mid-round picks and an extra one in 2026. So, I mean, he always thanks us for what we do. We really appreciate that, Daniel. And he said, y'all reviewed this team late last year, but wanted an update with picks and players being more solidified. Not super sure what to do from here. He said feels caught between still in a rebuild or going towards a house money. I would say, to be honest, you're going to be a house money team after you spend these picks.
100% I agree. And he does have some context here. We apparently reviewed this team late last year, but he wanted to update with the picks and the players being more solidified. He feels as well that Marvin Jr. is like almost a sure lock to go 101, so he won't be available at that 102. And he also said that Neighbors is expected to go at 103, so he won't be there at the 104. So you're kind of like caught in a spot because ideally you would want to take one of those quarterbacks and pair it with a receiver, but I mean, at this point, Marv's not going to be available, and you're not taking Neighbors over Caleb Williams. So you're kind of left stuck in a rock and a hard place here, unless the option I would go is potentially seeing if Kyler Murray can get you like a Garrett Wilson equivalent receiver.
Yeah, I would imagine if the receivers are going that high, he probably cannot.
I agree.
It's probably likely that the receivers are very highly valued. What I would probably try and do is see what you can do and moving up from 104 to 103. You could get crazy with this thing and take Neighbors 102 and just say, I'm just going to take whatever quarterback falls 104. But to me, that's a little bit shaky. It is a 10-team league, so it's possible that, the quarterback position is undervalued for that reason. But rest assured, you need a quarterback, and you're going to get Caleb Williams 102. So I would just take the gift that you're going to get with Caleb Williams 102 there and see if you can get up to 103 to get Neighbors. Worst case scenario. The other thing, too, is you might miss out on Odunze as well with that 107. So it's difficult, man. If you're on the board at 104 and the best available player is Drake May or Jane Daniels, like, you might just be, again, we always talk about it with rookie drafts. You don't draft for need. You just draft the best players available. You're not competing anyway. So it's not like you have to go into the season and start a great starting lineup or whatever. You can just hold those assets, I guess. The other dynamic of this league that does make it make more sense that Neighbors is going to go 103 and and Harrison's going to go 101 is you can start 3 running backs and 4 wide receivers every week.
Oh, I didn't even notice that wrinkle.
It makes sense why the quarterback position is undervalued in this league.
Yeah, and a 10-team start 11 where people can start up to 4 receivers. Yeah, that changes a lot. I thought there was just going to be more flexes when I saw the start 11, but there's only one flex. Like there's dedicated spots to both running back and wide receiver. So those positions inherently are going to be more valuable. It's tough, man. Like again, I don't think I can stomach taking Malik Neighbors over Caleb Williams, but
I can't either.
yeah, like that's kind of where I come back
Your
to.
best course of action is to try and get the 103. And if you can't get the 103, maybe you trade down from 104 to a team that needs a quarterback. Maybe you could trade down from 1-4 to 1-6, even if you're just picking up a second rounder or something like that, and just take Rome Odunze at that point in time, and you can fill out your wide receiver, because you definitely do need more wide receivers with this team. So it would be unfortunate if you got skunked completely at 1-2 and 1-4. You had to take 2 quarterbacks, but at the same time, you have 107, you have 108, you have 109. You're going to be able to hammer out some wide receivers at that point in time.
Yeah, and he also says here that the league dynamic is very weird. Half of the managers are inactive and or idiots. So you just have some inactive idiots pretty much. 2 monsters, 2 contenders, and then the rest of us. So I mean, what if you're doing the math there? 5 of them are just going to be idiots, 2 of them monsters, 2 of them contenders, and then it's just you, I guess.
Yeah, or yeah, I guess if it's a 10-team league, I mean, you're probably going to be a contender pretty soon here.
I would
And
agree.
hopefully some of the other contenders maybe fall out of favor because they have aging assets or whatever the case is. So, I mean, if you do this thing right, you could definitely join those monsters as
I
you know,
agree.
teams that are going to run this league. Because if you have Caleb Williams to this team, say worst case scenario, you have to take Drake May at 104 because he slides there or whatever. Maybe he gains a shit ton of value and you can sell off Kyler Murray and roll with Caleb Williams and Drake May going forward or whatever the case is. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it is still tricky, in my opinion here, because he says Neighbors is probably going 103. Like, have you talked to this guy? That's what I would be wondering.
Yeah, that the other thing I'd be wondering too potentially is it egregious to take Odunze 104 if you think there's a good chance that Daniels or May might fall to 107?
Even knowing that, like, who would they pass on at that point? That would be kind of where I'm
Well, if
left
you
with.
take Odunze 104, that means that
105, 106. Who are they going to
105,
take?
106, if it's a wide receiver heavy room, maybe they take a very good landing spot, Brian Thomas Jr., over one of the quarterbacks. Maybe they take even potentially Bowers over one of the quarterbacks as well.
If they do that, like, I would be shocked. Like, I think that's way
Again,
too
this
risky.
is going to be a market research type of league. Like, you got to look at these rosters. You got to say, okay, what are these guys likely to do? Is it possible to get to 103? Let's say it's not. The guy's going to take Neighbors. It's not possible. Then you're like, okay, what are the chances that one of these quarterbacks falls back to me at 107? Again, we wouldn't advise most people to draft like this, but given the nature of this league scoring and given the nature of your league's behavior, that's where we have to make adjustments. That's honestly the reason we make videos like this in the first place, is because the one size fits all advice for Daniel Kraus doesn't really apply here, because his league is a completely wonky format. The league market's really different. So again, you're going to really have to do some market research with this thing in terms of how to handle your rookie draft. And maybe it comes down to actually being on the clock and having to make maneuvers at that point in time. But again, there's going to be quarterback needy teams out there. At 104, if you don't want a quarterback and Drake May, Jaden Daniels are slated to go there, maybe you can sell that pick for a wide receiver straight up. Maybe 104 gets you Chris Olave straight up or something like that.
Yeah, or maybe like you mentioned that you think that Marvin Harrison Jr. is a lock to go 101. Like, maybe the guy with a monitor actually has a contending team, so he wouldn't be able to do that. But if you really wanted to get an out on a wide receiver for the quarterback asset, that would be that type of direction. Maybe somebody's willing to do. I mean, you have Puka, but Garrett Wilson plus something like that plus, because I really do feel like the traditional mindset of the quarterback position is a lot more devalued because of the context in the league, that there are 7 dedicated running back and receiver spots a week, not just flex where you can play whatever your strong suit of your roster. 7 dedicated wide receiver and running back spots, 3 running back, 4 wide receivers. Like, that is a lot of context to be added than the generic, start 11, 10-team super flex league.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm looking at some of his trades. I mean, we've probably gone over some of these. Like he said, we've broken down this team before. Bijan in the first that ended up being 106. You get Puka 102, Gabe Davis 203 and 302.
Yeah.
Again, when I'm equating value there, I think 102 for Bijan is probably a fair deal. And then you got Puka basically for the 106. Puka, Gabe Davis 203 and 302 for the 106, which I think was obviously an awesome move there for you. Just selling off Deshaun Watson, getting the 107, 108, and Josh Dobbs, absolutely free cash. Deshaun Watson, honestly, not even worth either of those picks by himself, let alone both of them together and Josh Dobbs. And then you sent away Justin Herbert and you receive Kyler Murray, a first and a second. Again, I don't think there's that big of a difference between those two assets, in my opinion. So I like the idea of insulating that trade and getting a first and a second out of it.
Well, I mean, especially given the context, like we said, where the quarterback position as a whole is devalued because of how much more priorities put at running back and wide receiver. Getting a still really good quarterback plus a future first and second that can help you with your running back wide receiver fill out. I'm really cool with making that move, especially knowing the context now that when you made this deal March 25th, Herbert is, a late first type of startup pick. Kyler Murray more of a mid-second. So if you're telling me I have the 110 in a startup and somebody's offering me the 205 and a 2026 1 and 2, 10 out of 10 times I'm making that deal. So I really like that. And like you said with Deshaun Watson, especially given the context of this league, getting 107 and 108 at the time that you did was always a sharp move.
Yeah, I would say the plan of action here is pretty simple for me. Between 102, 104, and 107, ideally, I would only like to walk away with one quarterback asset. And if you walk away with two, because Drake May or Jane Daniels or whatever falls to you, you probably need to see what you can get for Kyler Murray or Bryce Young on the open market. Probably, ideally, Bryce Young. If you can swap out Bryce Young for like a young wide receiver with upside like Jordan Addison, I guess you have Jefferson already, but like T. Higgins even, or maybe
that might be
you
tough.
probably won't get up to that high of a player. I'm trying to think who's like the type of asset you would get with Bryce Young straight.
I mean, do you send Bryce Young for Rashee Rice right now, knowing the
Rashee Rice is a good option. Maybe you could get Zay Flowers for Bryce Young. Maybe you could get somebody like that, even a JSN if you're a JSN truther, or even a productive asset like a Deebo Samuel or DK Metcalf might even make some sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it is a tough spot because obviously you know how much value quarterbacks have usually in Superflex leagues, but I mean, you're just not going to get 100% of the value given 3 running backs, 4 wide receivers. Like if this was 4 flexes, it'd be completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, ideally you walk away with a good amount of wide receivers in this rookie draft. The nice thing, 107, 108, 109, you could probably hammer out Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas, Ladd McConkey in good landing spots. And I wouldn't be opposed. I think McCarthy loses quite a bit of value in this league format. I don't think he should go ahead of those guys, to be honest.
Yeah, like in this type of format, he's probably worth
110, 111 probably.
I was going to say somewhere between the 109 and the 203, but not quite the 109 and a little bit more than 203. So like, yeah, 111 is probably a good spot.
Yeah, so you could walk away with a bunch of wideouts in this format. That's probably what I would be looking to do. The other thing, too, is you could start 3 running backs every week. 109 might not be too early for the first running back off the board as well.
Agreed. Or maybe like RB3 is available at 203 as well. Like, who knows?
Yeah. Exactly. So, but you also have a lot of picks next year. I wouldn't be opposed to just like punting the running back position, letting your team develop in 2024. And if things are breaking right for you, maybe making some moves to get some more running backs. But for the most part, I think you can fill that out in the 2025 class. So moving on to the next team we have here is from Andrew S. 12-team PPR league, super flex format. Justin Herbert is the main quarterback. Javonte Williams pretty much is the only running back. Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Brandon Ayuk, Steph Diggs, Marquise Brown, Cooper Kupp at wide receiver, and then Tucker Kraft and nothing else at tight end. So very good wide receiver core. You got one stud quarterback there, but not a whole lot else behind those guys. With the 101 and 102, I mean, it's pretty obvious you're going to be taking Caleb Williams with one of those picks and Marvin Harrison with the other. The 110, you're probably looking at maybe RB2 or RB1 or 2 in this class, or probably best wide receiver available, just given the strength of this class. And then you do have an extra one in 2025 to help fill out that running back core probably in the long term. So, I mean, the nice thing is what you need in this draft lines up well with what your rookie picks are going to be. 1-1, you're going to get yourself a QB2. 1-2, you're going to get yourself an elite wide receiver in Marvin Harrison. 110, add another wide receiver. Maybe JJ McCarthy falls to that point, but probably not. But for the most part, yeah, I mean, you're well set up to just fill out your needs in this running back, in this wide receiver class, and then hopefully get your running backs in 2025. The other thing I might consider doing, because you have Tucker Kraft and nothing else at tight end, is seeing how much more on top of 110 it gets you if Bowers starts to slide beyond the 106. If it's 107, 108 or whatever, and Bowers is still on the board and all it costs you is 110 in your 25 second to go up and get Bowers and secure your tight end position, I would definitely consider doing that.
Yeah, or maybe that guy's unwilling to do a second. I mean, I know Javonte Williams is your only running back right now, but if it costed 110 plus Javonte to go up to the 107 for Bowers, I don't think you're complaining, to be honest, especially knowing that the rest of your team would be
Kupp
set.
and Diggs, because they're competitive assets and they're not really fitting your build. If you could take 110 and Cooper Kupp and get 107 and a future
second
2-2s or something like that.
I don't think you'll get 2-2s.
Maybe not quite that much. Maybe get
Probably
a 2 and a 3 on top of it or whatever. That might make more sense. But getting Kupp and Diggs off your team wouldn't be the worst idea in the world either.
Yeah, no, I agree that they kind of stick out like a sore thumb because the rest of it is very young, very appreciating, especially when you add the context that you're adding 101 and 102.
Yeah, but in an ideal world, Diggs is producing like a stud receiver. Cup is producing like a stud receiver during the season. You can sell them for a 1 and 2 during the year. And then in 2025, instead of having 2 1s, a 2 and a 3, maybe you have 3 1s and 3 2s or something like that to be able to fill out the rest of your roster. But I mean, this one's pretty straightforward to me, man. Like, you're going to get Justin Herbert and Caleb Williams as your QBs going forward. You're going to have Harrison, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Brandon Ayuk, very young, very good wide receiver core. The first real course of action is to sell off Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, and Javonte if they're producing. If they're not, you might be stuck holding them a little bit, and maybe address your tight end position using Bowers in this rookie draft, but you're probably going to have to maneuver up the board because he's probably not going to be there at 110.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we can go through some of these trades as well, rapid fire, because pretty much like it's going to take us rapid fire to analyze that you won pretty much all of these deals. Mooney plus the 312 for Cooper Kupp. I understand Cooper Kupp's older. I understand he's coming off a bad year, but I would still much rather the Cooper Kupp side here. I'm assuming you agree.
Yeah, he said trade 1, 2, and 4 were all the same person, and he doesn't have any idea what that guy is doing because Jahan Dotson 301, 305 for Steph Diggs. I get Diggs had a down year, but that is absolute highway robbery in my opinion. And T. Higgins and Josh Downs for Garrett Wilson, also highway robbery. So trades 1, 2, and 4. You made up some ground with this roster because that guy is brain dead basically and doesn't know how to make trades properly in Dynasty.
How do you know it was with the same person?
He mentioned that in the thing. I just forgot to put it in the doc here.
Oh, forgot you. Okay, fair. Yeah, I mean, like all these deals, you got Kupp, Diggs, Herbert overall for fodder, Dotson, who, yeah, he's pretty interesting. So basically, 3 3s, Dotson, Mooney, the 112 and Kyler gets you Herbert, Diggs, and Kupp.
Herbert and the Herbert deal was a different person. It was trades 1, 2, and 4 that he got from the same guy. Sorry, it was the fault. Garrett Wilson for the T. Higgins and Josh Downs trade that he got Wilson at. Like, again, easy move for Wilson.
I did not even see that Garrett Wilson deal. Yeah, you took this guy to the woodshed and you told him to come back with the hammer so you can hit him with it.
Yeah, I mean, given the context of his team, I don't think that you had to make that Herbert move. It's not like it was an absolute lock that you had to make that. But again, Kyler in the 112 for Herbert, I think that's it's whatever. If you love Herbert and you think it's a good buy low opportunity, that's fine.
Like, I really like Kyler, but if you're telling me I can pay Kyler plus 80 Mitchell to get the security of Justin Herbert, who I think's got the upside to be a top 5 starter pick, which as much as I love Kyler Murray, I don't think he's got that in his range of outcomes anymore at this point, especially knowing the market inconsistency we see in terms of his trade value in some leagues. I'm making that move every single time.
Yeah, definitely makes some sense there. I mean, he said big question is what to do with the 110, 101, 102. I mean, he said he feels pretty locked into the guys that he talked about. He said sent some feelers about moving the 110 for a running back. That is not what I would be doing. He said, I'm not sure that's the right move. Trust your gut, man. That's not what I would be doing. I would be much more likely, like I said, to try and get up and get Brock Bowers with that 110 than I would be to send it away for like a running back, because you are not, even if you added, say you got lucky and some guy gave you Jacobs for 110 or something, you're still not ready to compete with this team.
I'd agree. By the way, I also want to add the added context. Yes, in the other situation, I'm cool moving from Herbert to Murray when it's a 2026 1 and 2, especially mid projection. When it is the 112 to move that difference, I would still rather add Herbert. So it kind of sounded like contradicting because I was talking about the Kyler Murray versus Justin Herbert relation earlier, but there's a huge difference between 2026 1 and 2 versus the 112 this year.
Yeah, because we have no idea where that pick is going to end up being. Yeah. So he said, looking for general guidance. He said he made a number of trades and he feels pretty good about it. Yeah, I would feel pretty good about all the trades that you made. Just keep chugging along. If your league market is this exploitable, like it looks like it is in some of these trades, maybe it's just that one person, but keep asking for stuff from him because he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. If I were you, given the fact that you ripped off a lot of his good assets, I would try and aim for his picks because they're going to end up being probably pretty high. Knowing what he gave up, basically gave you Garrett Wilson, Diggs, and Kupp for basically a bag of biscuits. So definitely love the moves that you've been making. You can keep chugging along, basically spend your picks, try and work up from that 110. And in 25, you should be adding your running backs into a competitive house money type of situation. So Brian Jones, the next team we're going to talk about here, 12 team, half PPR, 4 point per passing touchdown, 1 quarterback league. So unfortunately that Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Bryce Young quarterback core is not in a super flex format, but definitely nice to have regardless. Nothing at running back, Chase Brown, Sean Tucker. I think I actually have running back cores like this with just Chase Brown and Sean Tucker as well. Nakua, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Jaden Reed, Jonathan Mingo and such there. Pat Freiermuth, Tucker Kraft and such at tight end. And then doesn't have his 1 this year. So it looks like you may have sold the 101. I don't know.
That's what I was going to get into. Like, if this is an actually 1 quarterback league, you got taken to the woodshed. Maybe I'm going under the assumption right now that maybe you forgot to fill out the super flex and this is a super flex deal. Because in the super flex, if you're buying for Mahomes for this, this is a fair deal. But in a one quarterback league, I'm not selling Marvin Harrison Jr. for Patrick Mahomes straight up in a one quarterback. Never mind Levis, Jordan Addison, Burks in a third as well.
Yeah, that's I'm really hoping you forgot to fill out the super flex spot, because
I'm praying.
this is a great super flex quarterback core if you have these three quarterbacks. But if this is a one quarterback league, like Danny said, you got taken to the absolute cleaners. I'm given the context of this trade, I think this was a super flex league, to be honest. I wouldn't imagine
I agree.
you would, this. But again, maybe I'm just putting you on the grill right now. If this was a one quarterback league, Mahomes ain't worth this. I'll tell you that for sure.
Well, because the other reason too, I'm assuming this is a super flex, not a one quarterback, and you forgot
because Levis is in the trade also.
Levis is in the trade, and would you really have the motivation to pay this for Patrick Mahomes if you had Justin Herbert in a one quarterback league?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's definitely a good point. If you already had Herbert and Bryce Young and Levis, like, why are you buying a quarterback? Yeah, to be honest.
So
I guess it was mid-season, so maybe Herbert wasn't performing, or he might have been injured already at that point in time. But regardless, I think definitely, I'm assuming this is a super flex league. If it is a super flex league, I think this was a decent price to pay for Mahomes. Although I will say, your team is not really in the position of buying elite assets, especially giving away a pick that became the 101. So I probably wouldn't have made this deal regardless. Even if it was a super flex league, I would have just seen what happened with Levis, seen what happened with Addison, spend that 101 potentially on Caleb Williams. I would rather have that package deal as opposed to the stud asset. The only reason this is a half decent trade is if you are ready to compete, ready to make a championship push, and you want Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, like, on face value, I would say that this is more than appropriate for Mahomes, because if we're equating this, like, if you were to tell me right now the context of the 102 in a startup and whatever, the 402 versus the 2025 third, they are very, or let's just say the 402 and Burks cancel each other out because they're very inconsequential to this deal. Levis, Addison, the 101 in the third, if you're equating that out, 101's probably a late first round startup pick, probably, let's just say the 109, give or take, in most rooms. Is that fair?
Yeah.
109. 109. Will Levis is probably a fourth. Jordan Addison is probably a fifth straight up for Patrick Mahomes. Like, I think that's a fair deal. And honestly, like, face value wise, probably lean Mahomes there. But given the context that you're struggling for depth to begin with, it kind of leaves you behind the eight ball, not having your picks, like you mentioned.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's definitely something that you have to take into account when you're a rebuilding team, because, I mean, you also got lucky with Puka Nacua. Like, your team could have been in an even worse position if you didn't luck into a top 10 dynasty wide receiver. I'm assuming you got him off waivers, you drafted him in last year's rookie draft, whatever, because I don't see a trade for him. So your team is like, you got three or four really good, solid wide receivers. You got three really good quarterbacks, assuming this is a super flex. Your tight end core is fine. It's not elite, but it's definitely good enough. You need to find out a way to get running backs onto this team. And that 101 pick could have been great. And same with that depth that you would have had with Levis and Addison and all those guys. You could have maybe traded down from 101 if you didn't want a quarterback, if Levis and Bryce Young, you believe in those guys. And then maybe you could have addressed your running back pick in that position and maybe added more wide receivers or taken Marvin 101 or whatever the case is. But now, because you've sacrificed some of that depth, you don't really have the affordability to do that. So right now, you kind of just have to hope that you're going to hit on your mid-round picks. At 201, maybe you get RB1 in the class at this pick. At 301, maybe take another shot on a running back, but like, you kind of have to hit on those running backs. Otherwise, in 2025, you're going to have to do the same thing again, which is hit on those picks and make sure you fill out your running back core, maybe more of your wide receiver core that way.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, again, a little bit of work to do. Maybe consider making some more moves, trading down, collecting more assets, collecting more picks, getting some more bites at the apple, because you won the trades that you made. I mean, like, I like Drake London in the third for DK Metcalf. I like the Patrick Mahomes deal at face value, assuming, again, it is a super flex trade and not a one quarterback trade. But the trade value and the trade strategy needs to change a little bit towards making sure you're getting more depth more than more stud assets, because generally speaking, getting stud assets is a good thing. But given your team situation, you kind of need depth a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
All right, so let's move on to Joseph's team here. This is a free submission of ours here. He submitted back in July, I think, and we never got to his team. So he resubmitted in February. If you guys are wondering when your team is going to get covered, we're in the mid-February submissions right now. But if you did submit last year and we never got to it, definitely leave that in the Dynasty Decision submission form down below. 10-team PPR league, 6-point per passing touchdown, super flex. Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, pretty solid quarterback core. Not a lot of Baker Mayfield in these Dynasty Decisions videos. Nobody has Baker on their team for some reason. Jahmyr Gibbs, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, Chuba Hubbard at running back, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, T. Higgins, Jaden Reed, Quentin Johnson with a sad face, Dontavian Wicks, and then Dalton Kincaid, Kyle Pitts, TJ Hawkinson. So very loaded at tight end. 105, 310, 405, and then also some extra picks in 2025. It looks like he doesn't have his own second or whatever in 2026. Maybe that is. I'm not sure because it just says 24 and 25. But regardless, very good team, good assets. He said he just finished year 2 of this league, went super young during the startup, and he said he's thinking of taking best available at 105. Feels very comfortable with either Malik Neighbors or the quarterbacks. I mean, when you're in a situation where your team is this good, you have the affordability to take best player available, because even though Malik Neighbors makes more sense for your team than the quarterbacks do, you can just take the liquidity of the quarterback position, maybe trade Kyler Murray, trade Baker Mayfield, whatever you really want to do.
Or you can take the 105 to T. Higgins and see how close you can get to Justin Jefferson. Maybe you have to add another piece and be able to do that. This is the type of team in a start 9-10 man league that I'm willing to pay even over quote unquote market value for some of these elite assets. And given the context of your team, the players that you have, the depth that you have across the board, like go nuts, have fun.
Yeah, I mean, even too, you have Jahmyr Gibbs already, but 105 might get you in the vicinity of Breece Hall or Bijan Robinson at running back, or maybe it even gets you straight up to Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, somebody like that, Drake London potentially, plus on top of the 105. So yeah, I mean, you don't have to spend that 105 on a rookie is basically our point. If Neighbors falls there, I think he's a great option. I think he would help your team quite a bit. But if you can get up to an elite running back, an elite wide receiver, this is a competitive team. You're in a very good winning window. You also have so much depth at tight end. Maybe you can package 105 plus Kyle Pitts or plus CJ Hawkinson, and maybe that gets you in the vicinity of, like you said, Justin Jefferson's on the low right now because of the quarterback situation. Maybe it doesn't get you quite there, but at the same time, like if it gets you closer, it gets you there. You're going to be really excited about adding Jefferson to this team, not having given up even T. Higgins. You'd have a starting lineup of Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, Jahmyr Gibbs, Kenneth Walker, CeeDee Lamb, St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins in the flex, friggin' Dalton Kincaid or Kyle Pitts or Hawkinson, whatever one you don't give away as your tight end. Like you'd be in a really, really good spot with this team. So he said he is hoping to sell a tight end, though he thought, or he doubt he can get decent value for him. I guess that's a position that a lot of people find themselves in this offseason because we have a lot of young guys with a lot of potential. A lot of guys are believing in a Dalton Kincaid. A lot of guys are believing in guys like that. He said, should I just hold tight end and be set for a decade? I mean, if you can't get the value you want for Hawkinson, Kyle Pitts, and Kincaid, I mean, like there's no reason to just sell them for nothing.
Yeah, I mean, if people are trying to lowball you because they say, hey, this guy has, all the tight ends, it's like, yeah, cool. Well, if you really want me to, I can put one of these guys in my flexes when I need to.
Yeah, that's basically what you have to deal with at this point. So he sent away on March, or it's not March 28th, January 28th, he sent away David Montgomery and received Jaden Reed. I think that was a pretty good move. He mentions that this league is very high on running backs in general, so that's why he was able to make that move. I don't think me and you view that as a very close trade, but in a league where running backs are heavily valued, I think I could see why people would like David Montgomery. But he said, I was very comfortable making this trade on February 2nd, given the nature of his league. Again, at face value, we wouldn't do this. Marvin Harrison Jr. plus the 201 for Jahmyr. But like, you get Jahmyr Gibbs and TJ Hawkinson here. It's not like TJ Hawkinson is nothing. I think he's more valuable, to be honest, than even the 201 is, because he's a top 6 dynasty tight end.
Maybe he's more valuable than the 201, but when you're combining that, that's probably Marvin Harrison Jr. plus the 201. I'm taking Marvin Harrison Jr. every single time and not thinking twice about it.
Given the context of his team, I'm fine with the trade. You got Gibbs out of it. You're a competitive team. I'm cool with it, to be honest.
I'm not giving Marvin Harrison Jr. up straight up for Jahmyr Gibbs and TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah, especially, I mean, I guess the other way that you go with this is if running backs are hard to acquire in general, you go cheap at running back. Instead of buying Gibbs, you buy Jacobs, you buy Barkley, you buy Pacheco, you buy Cook, you buy guys like that. Rashad White is a good competitive running back that you can get on the cheap right now. Yeah. Buying a high-end running back definitely makes sense. When you're a competitive team, you're in a position where you just need high-end point producers. But if the price tag is this high, maybe it makes sense to just be weak at that position and be so loaded everywhere else.
Like I mentioned, I'm fine overpaying in some spots. I just view, even with the context of your league valuing running backs heavily, I view Marvin Harrison Jr. as just being straight up to the package that you got, because you're taking on some risk there with Hawkinson, older tight end, now coming off of a multi-ligament tear. Like I
disagree. I think his risk is baked in.
It is, but not when you're moving off Marvin Harrison Jr. You're absorbing all the risk and not
right. But like I said, given his league context, not that I agree with it, I think his league views 102 Marvin Harrison Jr. and Gibbs as equivalent assets. And I don't like, even in our context of how we view Jahmyr Gibbs, like how much would you need on top of Jahmyr Gibbs to return value on that trade?
if that's the case, I'm just keeping Marvin, trading one of my other receivers up to Jahmyr Gibbs. Like I'm not trading Marvin Harrison Jr., who I think has a very good chance to be the wide receiver one after this season, for
Yeah.
Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, like you said, you could have traded T. Higgins potentially instead for Saquon Barkley or something, and
Yeah,
then you have a good point producer, not quite as good as Jahmyr Gibbs, but you didn't trade away Marvin Harrison Jr.
for sure. Yeah, that's my thought on it.
But again, regardless, I think even if you may have lost that trade at face value, you probably might win the championship this year. So it might not matter altogether. But regardless, I mean, you don't really have much else you need to do. Again, at 105, that's the only real pivot point we're talking about here. If Neighbors isn't there and it is a quarterback that you're looking at, I think you should sell that pick for a wide receiver. That's probably what I would end up doing. If you have the chance to do that. I mentioned Breece Hall and those type of guys. You might not be able to get them using that 105, given what you said about the context of your league valuing running backs very heavily. But go after a Garrett Wilson with that 105 pick, see if you can get it done. Go after a Puka Nacua with that 105 pick, see if you can get it done.
Especially knowing like you can start 2 flexes and it's not like the last league, for example. Like if people valued running back heavily and you made that deal in the last week where you had to start 3 running backs a week, I would understand it more. But knowing the context that you can start up to 4 wide receivers anyways, just feel like you kind of rushed the punch on this one.
Yeah, for sure. So let's move on to the next team of the video, the last team of the video here from Alex here. Another free submission, 12-team half PPR, super flex league with Anthony Richardson, Deshaun Watson as the top quarterbacks, Jahmyr Gibbs as the only real running back of value, Garrett Wilson, A.J. Brown, Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, Mingo, and some other guys there at wide receiver. Kyle Pitts, Isaiah Likely, Jake Ferguson at tight end.
team
Does somehow have the 101, 102, 104, and 112 in this league. This is one of those teams where people are like, oh, you're just like flexing your assets kind of thing. But this one's fun, man. I think this is a very good nucleus of players. You have a very good wide receiver core. You have one really solid quarterback that I believe in and one upside guy that could turn into something. And you have a stud running back already. So, I mean, this is the type of team that I think you could really turn into a contender quickly by spending these picks or maybe moving off of some of these picks for some veterans. Because, I mean, at 101, he said this league is so hard to trade in. So it's going to be difficult probably for you to sell 104 for a or I guess you have Garrett Wilson already, 104 for like Breece Hall or something like that to try and make this thing a competitive roster. So you might be better off just kind of spending your assets. At 1-1, you take Caleb Williams. At 1-2, you take Marvin Harrison. At 1-4, you take Malik Neighbors. Or you take maybe another quarterback is available and you want to take him and move off of Watson or something like that. At 112, you take Ladd McConkey or whatever with this team. So
maybe a couple running backs at 202,
204. Maybe you hammer out some running backs because you need some running backs for this roster. And I think this is the perfect team that if you walked out of this rookie draft with Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., say Malik Neighbors, 112, you get Jonathan Brooks. 202, you get Trey Benson. 204, you get Audric Estime and 3rd round draft capital, or Blake Corum and 3rd round draft capital. This is a house money team pretty quickly.
Absolutely. I mean, I would even go as far to say that if you're drafting running backs with immediate production appeal, whether that's Trey Benson going in the top 50 to the Las Vegas Raiders or the Dallas Cowboys, or Jonathan Brooks going to the Cowboys, like you can pretty much tell after the draft which running back should get opportunity early. If you end up with 1 or 2 of those guys, you're able to pair them with Jahmyr Gibbs in a start 8 league. You have an advantage at quarterback. You have a big advantage at wide receiver. You have potentially an advantage at Kyle Pitts if he lives up to the expectations I have for him. Like, never mind house money. I think he can be easily a top 4 team.
Yeah, this could even be a monster if things break right for you. Like if you take Caleb and he turns into a stud right away, you take Marvin, he turns into a stud right away. Like you're going to go 5 deep at wide receiver. You get RB2 or better production out of 2 or 3 of your running backs. I also wouldn't be opposed to as well at 112, 202, and 204. If you wanted to move those picks for veteran running backs, I don't think that's a terrible move either. Maybe the 112 gets you Kyron Williams because your league's not high on him. Maybe the 112 gets you Rashad White. Maybe it gets you Kenneth Walker. Maybe it gets you Saquon Barkley or Josh Jacobs or something like that. Maybe the 204 can get you 2 running backs like Aaron Jones, James Conner from a competitive team that just wants draft capital. Like it's possible that you could really build out your running back core and be ready to win this championship right away.
Yeah, no, I think you pretty much summarized that. We got a couple of deals here listed as well. I'll go in chronological order. It's funny about this first deal because if you're looking at it at the time that this deal was made versus even now, they're like, it's kind of even for multiple ways, if that makes sense. Because when you made it at the time, Drake London was less valued than he is now. Bryce Young was much more valued than he is right now. And I would say that Jalen Waddle was much more valued than he is right now. So at the time, it's like, okay, it's pretty fair either the way you slice it. Now it's more fair for different reasons because Bryce Young lost so much value, but Drake London gained so much value, and Dylan Waddle comparatively is now less valuable than Drake London, when at the time that you made this deal, probably went a couple rounds in a startup above him.
Yeah, and also the first is more valuable because we're closer to the draft too. So
Yeah.
it's really weird, that deal, how it ended up shaking out. I would say Jalen Waddle versus Drake London now, again, a little bit more of it's closer to a wash, but I would slightly prefer London. And then the first straight up for Bryce Young, and the third, again, you might have lost this deal slightly, but generally speaking, I think it was fine.
But I just also noticed that there is context added here, because I do see listed on his team, he has 2 2025 firsts, 1 early, 1 regular. I don't think this team that you have is going to be that early first. So maybe you traded for this early first. And if that's the case, I lean your side a lot more than I had if this is a mid to late projected first.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Good eye there. AJ Dillon and 10 fab for Jonathan Mingo on October 11th. I guess at the time you were thinking, oh, the routes are there for Mingo. Maybe he's going to turn it on down the stretch. You also, maybe you're like, I mean, you had Bryce Young, you wanted to acquire Mingo. Maybe you're like a Panthers fan or something like that. I have no idea. But regardless, I think this was probably sound process. AJ Dillon wasn't worth anything. You take the upside swing on a rookie wide receiver.
I'm just laughing because I just see $10 fab. It's like, this is such an inconsequential inconsequential trade either way you slice it on both sides. It's just like, I can only imagine negotiations. You went to this guy and you're like, hey, I will give you AJ Dillon for Jonathan Mingo, and he comes back, he's like, can't do that straight up, but if you throw me a little moolah, you throw me some 10 fab, I will consider it. And you guys end up doing that.
Yeah, I know. 10 fab is just a complete nothingness in this trade. But October 21st, you send off a heater here. Lamar Jackson was on your roster. You send him Jaden Reed and a second, which projects to be early. Again, when you made this trade, I'm assuming Jaden Reed wasn't nearly this valuable. The second was probably not thought to be of as early, at least maybe not as early as it ended up being. And then you got A.J. Brown, a 2024 first. I'm not sure which first this ended up being, but given that you gave up Lamar Jackson and Jaden Reed, I'm assuming it was not one of the 3 early ones. It was probably the 112. And then the second that you ended up getting was late, which is the 212, which would stack up and make sense there as well. So giving up Lamar and Jaden Reed, and like, I mean, Lamar Jackson is probably worth this deal by himself, to be honest.
I would easily take Lamar over the side of the package you got by himself. Easily.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe you got a little bit hasty here. Maybe like AJ Brown was on a mean streak at this point in time. October 21st, he was ripping through the NFL.
Start 8 super flex, Lamar Jackson, given the rushing advantage he gives to your lineup. Like, I gotta tell you how
this is like the type of deal that's just totally unlucky across the board. Lamar ended up nailing the rest of the season. Jaden Reed gained a shit ton of value. The second rounder probably wasn't expected to be early that you sent away. You got the 112 and 212 back on the other side of this deal, and AJ Brown lost a little bit of value with the collapse of the Eagles team down the stretch. So not a great trade, but again, you kind of made up for it a little bit just with the fact that your team is loaded. Like, I mean, the trades you've made so far, maybe you should stop making trades because the rest of your team is just already ready to go. And he did say this league is hard to make trades in. Maybe this is why. It's like the only trades you can end up making are ones that you end up losing.
Yeah, like I just don't trade if that's the case, because I mean your team's already way better than the majority of the teams in this league anyway. So just don't trade, because apparently it's just not working out when you do.
Yeah, like the number one move that I would consider doing here is either spending those late 112, 202, 204 on rookie running backs, or using those picks to try and go and get competitive running backs, Saquon, Rashad White, Kyron Williams. Maybe you can get up to an ETN because of the situation there with the way they're talking up Tank Bigsby or whatever. But for the most part, this team's going to be ready to compete once you add one guy who's going to give you RB2 production. Let's say Trey Benson, like you said, goes to the Raiders or something like that. You can just get skinny with this. Just Jahmyr Gibbs, Trey Benson, double hero RB all the way to the championship with the rest of the team.
It's just funny because like we're talking about like this last deal, you had Lamar Jackson on this team, and maybe you had known that your picks were going to be early at that time. Who knows? But it's just so funny because it's like your team's already in such a great position despite even making that deal. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the weird thing would have been if you had kept Lamar on this team, then you would have been looking at a situation where like you might have had Lamar, Anthony Richardson, Caleb Williams, and Deshaun Watson with this roster. And maybe you don't get the 101 if that was end up your pick or whatever, because you held Lamar and he obviously produced like a madman down the stretch. And same with Jaden Reed too.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, fair play. Either way though, I mean, obviously we don't have to spend much longer on this team. Like you have a lot of picks, you have a great team, like go try to win the championship.
Yeah, I mean, even your depth is like good depth. Like Demario Douglas, Dontavian Wicks, like Darnell Washington, Isaiah Likely. Like those guys are like interesting. You know what I mean? Like
Jake
everybody on the team
Ferguson.
is pretty solid. So yeah, definitely a very, very good team that you got on your hands here. That is the end of the video. If you guys did make it to the end, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. I'm actually in Mexico right now as we're recording this Tuesday. We're probably going to drop it, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, somewhere around there. So yeah, definitely having some fun by the pool, in the sun, whatever the case is. But really appreciate you guys sticking to the end. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, like I said, and also make sure to check out flockfantasy.com. Use that promo code FSE. When you use the promo code FSE, you get first priority to these videos so we can break down your teams, your rookie pick questions, your trades, all that good stuff. If that interests you, link down below in the description. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.